Thanks everyone for coming out. The time is now 6 p.m., June 3rd, 2025. Call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Oconee County Council. Let's begin with a moment of silence. Mr. Root, would you pray for us?
Yes, sir. Pray with me if you'd like to. Well, dear Father, thank you for the day. Thank you for our lives, the very air we breathe. Without you, it's impossible. So we're fundamentally grateful for that. I'm thankful for the turnout this evening. I really pray that you would just enthuse this county and the citizens to be a part of and help county government as it works to make things right, make things good within this county, to serve the citizens. And that you guide us through this meeting tonight, that it would be your meeting, and in your name I pray. Amen.
Mr. James Coley, would you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have County Attorney comments. Mr. David Root.
I have none at this point, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
None, Mr. Root, thank you. Mr. Amanda Brock, Administrator comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a reminder that we do not meet the first meeting in the month of July as we celebrate the Independence Day holiday that very week. Our next regularly scheduled council meeting will be July 15th at 6 p.m.
Thank you for that, Ms. Brock. All right, now we have a consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any items to be removed off the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor? Next, we have public comment session. Just a reminder, it's limited to 5 minutes. We ask that you please limit your comments to things that has to do with county government or things within the purview. And 5 minutes at the 4-minute mark, I'll time with my phone. I'll hold a yellow 1-minute warning sign. And at the 5-minute mark, I hold up a red stop sign.
Miss Emily Hitchcock.
Thank you for giving me Hitchcock, and I live in Mountain Rest. I'm a former member and chair of the Oconee County Conservation Bank. So you won't be surprised to hear that I want to speak on 2 items, both related to the bank. First, with respect to the Keys Family Farm, I urge you to accept the recommendation of the OCCB and vote to fund a grant for a placement of a conservation easement on the Keys Family Farm. The preservation of our farms is of critical importance. This property is a 553-acre farm that is actively farmed today and is environmentally sensitive. The placement of a conservation easement will ensure that it remains a working farm that will benefit future generations. Second, with respect to the proposed amendments to the Oconee County Conservation Bank Ordinance, I urge you to vote no. Here are my reasons. The proposed amendments are very significant. The list of eligible conservation activities added in Section 2-403C is quite extensive. On its face, this section is inconsistent with the OCCB's original purpose, which was the permanent protection of land. While many of the activities enumerated in 2-403C may have public and conservation value, none of them create a permanent protection. Some may not even have a public purpose. For example, subsection 7 permits the development and improvement of private water supply infrastructure. The sole purpose of that subsection is to use OCCB money for a private purpose. Everyone is aware that the largest donation to the OCCB was made by Duke Energy as a part of a settlement agreement with FERC during a relicensing review. At that time, the county accepted the money, and the OCCB's purpose was to fund the permanent protection of conservation lands. I do not know what impact, if any, the redirection of OCCB funds for non-permanent or private use may have on Duke's next relicensing review. At a minimum, however, I think it behooves council to consider its relationship with Duke before it adopts these amendments. I have solicited donations for the OCCB and was part of the fundraising efforts by both Oconee Forever and Rally in the Valley. I was told multiple times that persons were concerned that the council would divert the funds for other uses. Aware of these concerns, council unanimously voted to amend section 2-402 to include the following sentence. Funds donated to the OCCB by third parties shall not be redirected by council. The current amendments appear to be a mechanism for redirecting those funds without expressly removing that statement from the ordinance. I object to this procedure and the purpose to redirect OCCB funds. We all know the citizenry's distrust of government is at an all-time high today. Not only will the people who make good faith donations, such as myself, to the OCCB feel like they can't trust the council in the future, but other citizens learning of this blatant redirection of funds may also distrust council. The question here is not whether the support of the proposed activities is good or not, whether or not you support them, think they're worthwhile. But is it okay to redirect funds donated in good faith for one purpose to a different use? I submit that it is not. In conclusion, the council has two options. One is to vote no on the proposed amendments. The other is to make this amendment prospective only, and that expressly provide that the current funds can only be used for the permanent protection of land as the people who donated those funds expected them to be used. Thank you. I have questions and more time if you have any. If you have any questions, I would be glad to answer.
Miss Jennifer, I should ask beforehand, how many speakers do we have?
We have 14.
So, we've only allotted 15 minutes. I'm gonna make a motion that we cut each individual time to 4 minutes and allow all 13 remaining to speak. That's my motion.
Second, I'll second.
All in favor?
Opposed?
All right.
Thank you. Martha File.
Thank you for allowing me to come and speak to you today. I am very concerned about the easement program and also the preservation of our lands in Oconee County as well as the upstate of South Carolina. I speak to you as a citizen. I've lived here for many years. I live in Seneca area. Conservation easement programs are a benefit for the landowners, community, the land trust organizations, and nature. We all have a responsibility to be steward of the land and of nature to ensure that our future generations have clean air, water, and land to explore and learn from. The conservation easement programs support landowners to contribute their land to the preservation and underdeveloped space for our future generations. The funding of parks, recreation facilities, personal property, enhancement, and other county needs is not the way these funds were intended or entrusted to Oconee County. There are grants available and other funding mechanisms for these activities throughout our county. The conservation easement program should remain unchanged to assist landowners in the preservation of their land for our future generations. Thank you.
My name is Linda Lovely. I've lived in Oconee County for 24 years, and I'm no stranger to rural lifestyles and values. I grew up in Iowa and spent many hours on my cousin's farms doing all kinds of chores. Why does the council want to make Ordinance 2025-12's proposed changes to the Oconee County Conservation Board? The motivation appears to be a misguided belief that permanent conservation easements represent an attack on individual property rights, and therefore that the funds dedicated to conservation easements should be diverted to other uses. On Facebook, one councilman claimed this ordinance is, quote, about protecting our land and our freedoms, not giving up control to outside interests for one-size-fits-all mandates. Wrong. A conservation easement does not give up control to outside interests. It gives Oconee County landowners a vehicle to protect and preserve their land, often land families have held for generations, from being clear-cut and paved over by developers. Developers who are often the true outside interests, raking off profits and moving on after erasing the land's unique character, ecological value, scenic beauty, and any future possibility it can be used as farmland, a timber stand, or a hunting preserve. At the heart of the property rights argument is the notion that conservation easements somehow steal the right of heirs to use the land as they see fit. How does this differ from a landowner selling a farm to a developer who builds a strip mall or a subdivision or a factory? In these instances, unlike a conservation easement, potential heirs lose all rights to their property. They can't farm it, they can't sell its timber, they can't hunt its deer, fish its streams, build a house on it, or lay any claim to it. So what about the argument that conservation easements are one-size-fits-all mandates? Wrong again. Conservation easements are tailored to the wishes of individual owners. The goal is to keep the land unsubdivided and relatively undeveloped, not straitjacket current or future landowners. When the easements are created, owners can opt to allow or disallow public access, and they decide acceptable uses. For example, easement terms may permit the owner of a family farm that currently grows soybeans to use the land to graze cattle, grow commercial timber, plant orchards, or be used for recreation or other activities. We are losing farmland at an alarming rate. Conservation easements are an essential tool to help families afford to keep farming, to protect Oconee County's irreplaceable rural land and green spaces. Please keep the funds that were donated for this purpose restricted to this use.
Good evening. My name is Chris Starker, and I'm speaking on behalf of Upstate Forever regarding the proposed ordinance 2025-12 to amend the Oconee County Conservation Bank ordinance. It is well within the purview of this council to amend county ordinances such as the one governing the Oconee County Conservation Bank. However, to date, the bank has been funded strictly by contributions made by private donors, including Duke Energy, with no money provided by the county. These contributions were made to support the bank's current purpose, which is now and always has been to protect lands with significant natural, cultural, and/or historic resources through conservation easements or fee simple purchases. If the proposal to amend the existing ordinance moves forward, it is incumbent upon this council to respect and uphold the restrictions donors understood to be true when contributing to the bank by ensuring all existing funds continue to be used strictly for permanent land protection as stated in the ordinance at the time of their donations. Upstate Forever and Oconee County and others in this room served on the stakeholder group assembled by Duke Energy related to the relicensing of the Kiwi-Toxaway hydroelectric project from where the majority of the bank's funding originated. The group's goal was to work with Duke to determine how to address unavoidable environmental impacts from the continued operation of the hydroelectric project. The primary outcome of roughly 5 years of negotiations between stakeholders and Duke Energy was a legally binding relicensing agreement signed by 16 stakeholders, including Upstate Forever and Oconee County. That agreement included a commitment by Duke Energy to provide $600,000 to the county's conservation bank, specifically for permanent land conservation, and was a critical component of Duke's application for continued operations of the hydroelectric project. Importantly, the agreement also included funding commitments to the Kiwi-Toxaway Habitat Enhancement Program and the Lake Kiwi Source Water Protection Team. In other words, there are already other initiatives established and operating separately from the Oconee Conservation Bank that have been funded specifically to support many of the new initiatives currently under consideration for the bank in the proposed revisions. Since its establishment, the bank has admirably carried out its mission of permanent land protection, protecting over 700 acres of land in Oconee County, including working farms, working forests, sensitive habitat, and water quality through fee simple purchases and conservation easements. The bank board appointed by Oconee County Council has wisely stewarded these funds to make them last, contributing meaningful but fiscally conservative funding awards to worthy land conservation projects. This approach allowed for more than a decade of leveraging state funds through the South Carolina Conservation Bank, resulting in hundreds of thousands of state dollars flowing to Oconee County property owners and to projects benefiting all county residents. One example is the 212-acre addition to the county's own, and I quote, best kept secret, Chow-Ram County Park, which doubled its size and was only possible through permanent land protection. In closing, we urge council to recognize the singular mission of the Oconee County Conservation Bank and to acknowledge that if the scope changes, measures must be taken to ensure that all remaining funds are used to support the purpose for which they were originally intended. Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen, and to all of y'all too, good evening. I wish you all well. My name is Joseph Tinsley, and I'm from Mountain Rest. I spoke last time here a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like I need to continue because I don't feel like my comments were addressed. I'd rather be home sitting on the porch waiting for the lightning bugs to come out, but I think this is pretty important. I'm not here to try to discuss with y'all the ethics of changing the ordinance, which will allow you to use money for a purpose it wasn't intended for. We all have to answer ethical questions for ourselves. And I'm not here to talk to y'all about the legality of it. If it comes to that, that'll be decided in courts, of course. I'm simply here to talk about conservation easements themselves because my wife and I have one on our property, so we definitely have skin in the game. During the discussion period last time, one of y'all remarked that you would like to change what these funds could be used for so that they could be used for things that didn't involve taking away rights. And I just want to take exception to that and say, no one took away our rights. We gave away some of our rights. We did that because we care for our community. We care for our county and state. We wanted to give the rights to clean air and water and wildlife to people in the future. Now, there are lots of folks who are out there who want to give other things. They want to give shopping centers. They want to develop things. They want to have factories and have jobs. And that's all important too. But conservation easements provide another important way to give to a community. And when I say we gave away rights, we didn't give away all the rights. I invited you to come walk on my property last week. No one took me up on that. I'll invite you again. We have 2 residences on our property anyway, and we reserve the rights to build another one. We can build one more nice house. We can subdivide the property. We can sell it. We can build a barn. We can build a shop. We can clear land to make a paddock. We can have a barn. We can bring power to it. We can put a road there.
This isn't land that's going to be like in a museum, you know, untouched and unuseful, and land that's not going to generate any taxes. We're reasonable folks, and we've retained reasonable rights. We do pay a lot of taxes. We pay thousands of dollars in taxes to this county, and we get services, and I appreciate all that and all the work that y'all do to try to be sure that we get the services we need. For myself, I also volunteer a tremendous amount. I put in hundreds of hours volunteering in this county every year and contribute a lot to civic organizations. So I'm not some crazy guy who lives out there in the woods and just looks at, you know, the trees all day or the birds or something like that. I'm part of this society, and conservation easements can be part of this society. Now, in terms of taking away rights in the future, if that's what you're suggesting, if you think about it, everything we do with property takes away rights in the future. I went yesterday and got a load of gravel at the rock quarry. That's a big hole in the ground, you know? Whoever decided to make that a rock quarry took away the rights of somebody in the future who might have wanted to be there on top of a hilltop. Can't do that anymore, you know? So if I let Blue Ridge Electric run a power line over a piece of my property. They said the neighbor wouldn't let them get it to a new house that was being built over there. The neighbor was being difficult. Would I allow it? I said, sure. What does that mean? They said, you can never put a house under it. And I said, well, I'll do that for my society. That limits the rights in the future too. So everything we do limits rights in the future, everything. It's just a question of what rights do you want to limit, you know? And so what I'd like to ask y'all to do when you're at home this evening, you're standing in your bathroom, brushing your teeth and looking in the mirror. I would like for you to ask yourself, am I working to be sure that everybody's rights to do with their property what they want are protected, or only the ones I believe in? Thank you.
Gary Owens.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Gary Owens. I live in Salem, and I've lived there for 20 years. I'm the president of the Advocates for Quality Development, AQD, a not-for-profit that represents about 5,000 of your constituents. AQD is one of the non-governmental Duke Energy stakeholders who participates in the Duke Energy licensing and relicensing projects on behalf of all of our members. In this role, we negotiate and express approval or disapproval on all aspects of each relicensing agreement. As an active and approving stakeholder in the 5-year process to relicense the already referenced Kiowee-Toxaway Hydroelectric Project, KT as it's known, we championed Duke Energy's contribution of $618,000 to the Oconee County Conservation Bank. Like all the other stakeholders, 16 have been mentioned earlier, AQD supported this contribution with the understanding that it was specifically earmarked to fund land conservation easements. These funds play a major role in helping Oconee County landowners like legacy Oconee County farmers who wish to voluntarily put their lands into conservation easements and are able to afford to do so. As a stakeholder, AQD representatives frequently engage with Duke Energy staff. After Council's May decision to advance Ordinance 2025-12 with its red line changes to the Oconee County Conservation Board, I've had several conversations with Duke staff. Like AQD and other stakeholders, they are concerned about the proposed changes. As a stakeholder, AQD believed the changes violate the intent of the original negotiated agreement, which limited these funds to local conservation easements. This change is not what AQD and other stakeholders agreed to when we signed the KT relicensing agreement after having worked on it for 5 years. The changes you're proposing, if passed, could kill the possibility that Oconee County will receive future Conservation Bank funding unless there is a clear stipulation that the funds will only be used for conservation easements. If this is not the case, AQD and the other conservation-minded Duke Energy stakeholders will strongly advocate funds we intended for conservation easements be directed to recipients who will use the money to help landowners voluntarily place their land in upstate conservation easements. I encourage all of you tonight, gentlemen, to vote no on this second reading and to withdraw the ordinance being proposed. I do thank you for your time and for your service.
Good evening. My name is Dale Wild, and I'm president of Friends of Lake Huey Society, folks, and we represent over 1,000 members and businesses in the Lake Huey watershed, which includes Oconee and Pickens County. We were established in 1993, and we have been a longtime stakeholder for reauthorization agreements with Duke Energy that resulted in funding for the Oconee County Conservation Bank. As such, we stand with Duke Energy and their comments opposing the proposed changes by the Oconee County Council that will divert funding critical for land conservation projects. If the changes are made, then all monies from such agreements should be held in an account separate from any previous agreements that specifically dedicated funding for land conservation. We respectfully ask the council to vote no on the amendment. Thank you.
Donna Wexley.
Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you for listening to us tonight. I'm the unusual speaker compared to everybody else. I have no formal connection to the Conservation Bank. I don't have a technical speech to give or a legal speech to give, but I have heard about what's going on. I have lived in Oconee also for 26 years. I have been here to help get Ripple of One off the ground. I have recently just spent 2 years answering phones for the crisis line for Safe Harbor. I'm deeply invested in Oconee County. And I also very, very much love the outdoors, and it's what has brought me to Oconee County 26 years ago. I think about the little people a lot, the people who don't have a lot of power. And I think in this case, the Conservation Bank was set up for those kinds of people who have been in Oconee a long time, who value the land, the water, the air. And the Conservation Bank was set up to help those kinds of people who want to commit their land for the future. But I think we all know it takes a great deal of legal expense to do so. And a lot of people who have this land don't have the resources to cover those legal expenses. And on just a very basic level, the Conservation Bank has brought in money, not from government agencies, but from individuals and Duke Energy and other companies. And I think it's an example of what happens in Oconee County is that regular people like me, I'm an unknown, but I'm able to contribute in my way and really try to make this county a better place. And it's what then attracts other people to Oconee County. And I liken myself to the people who may need this money from the Conservation Bank in order to put their land in an easement to protect it for the future. So I just ask that you allow that money to continue to be used for that and just for that. Thank you.
Bettina George.
Good evening, my name is Bettina George. I'm from Mountain Rest. And basically, everything that needs to be said has been said much more articulately than I can. So I'm not going to rehash what you've heard from so many people already. I just want to say, as a conservation easement holder, I feel very good that after my husband and I are gone, that the properties that we have protected will protect the watershed of the Chattooga, will provide clean air, will provide wildlife habitat. And the Conservation Bank was set up to do that and to protect farmlands, which I think are critical. So I will close just by saying that I am proud to have those properties that my husband and I protected forever.
Good evening, council members. Andy Smith, Mountain Rest citizen. Exactly what is the council doing or is prepared to do to protect working farms in Oconee County? It appears nothing. In my 32 years of working as a conservation lawyer, the best tool I've ever seen for protecting farms is through conservation easements. You know that the Farm Bureau, of all entities, has created a land trust for the sole purpose of putting conservation easements on farms because they know that they're getting lost at an alarming rate. And the people that put conservation easements on their property, they're turning down hundreds of thousands of dollars that they could be making and selling their property for developments. I mean, that's a huge sacrifice that these people are making. And I agree that when you put a subdivision or an industrial complex on a farm, it's never going to be a farm again. Don't you have to admit that you've taken away all the rights and ability of anybody in the future to do anything with that? I mean, it seems like y'all are actually against family farms and working farms. I know you'll say you're for agriculture and you support it in Oconee County, but your actions belie that. And that's what you'll be known by, is your actions. When Duke gave that money, the conservation easement, the conservation bank ordinance that was in place allowed one purpose, and that was the permanent protection of private property through conservation easements and fee simple transactions. That's what Duke was looking at and said, bingo, $618,000. That one thing. I went to the first Oconee County Conservation Bank Board meeting this year, and talk about misconstruing what conservation easements are. There was a member of that bank board who, he's a smart guy, so I have to think that he wasn't telling the truth. But he said he tried to buy property in Mountain Rest that had a conservation easement on it, that you couldn't put a piece of property, that you couldn't put a house on. That piece of property didn't have and never will have a conservation easement. He was either lying or dumb. I don't know which. But it was just a total misconstruction of reality. And the same thing is true about what was said at the last meeting about, the quote was, we don't govern off of personal intent. We go off what we have here. 5 years ago, you and I discussed conservation easements. You were sitting right there. And you expressed 5 years ago that you didn't like them, you were against them. Personal intent, political intent. 5 years ago, before you ever knew about the memorandum of understanding. You're being disingenuous when you say that you govern by what's there. You're governing by personal intent and personal interest, not by what you have here. That's disingenuous. It's not the truth. That's all I have.
Eddie Martin.
I'm Eddie Martin, Executive Officer of Oconee Preservation Unlimited Stewardship Trust. We were formed in 2004 to try to preserve the areas in Oconee County that needed to be set up and protected. I was part of the Stump House Initiative, where we saved Stump House Mountain, Issaquena Falls, and another 500 acres to envelop 1,000 acres in that property that was now held in trust under a conservation easement so that anybody in Oconee County can visit it. At that point in time, they were talking about selling it. We were going to develop it, we were going to put a gate on it, and when nobody goes there. But now, everybody in Oconee County and across the nation can go there. A conservation easement is an agreement with the landowner to sell the property rights, development rights, so that nothing can happen past this point outside of what that landowner desires. If that is not property rights, I don't know what it is. I'm here to speak about this ordinance. I was in on the very beginning of the discussion for the creation of the Oconee County Conservation Bank. My input at that time was that we needed to build a non-governmental entity to distribute this money for fear of exactly what is happening right now. Yeah. That the diversion of these funds is going to go somewhere else from the initial path that they were meant to be. Duke Power, in order to get their licensing agreement, agreed to fund permanent conservation. This ordinance duplicates services that are already offered from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, a department of the United States Department of Agriculture. Fencing, wells, other things are already available for people to go to an office that we have right here in Walhalla to get. This ordinance was created to provide permanent protection for landowners who wanted to see their personal property continue in the avenue that they have always provided. I want you to vote no on this ordinance. I want you to change your mind about the focus of what you're trying to do to the Conservation Bank. We set this up in order to preserve Oconee County permanently.
I'm Lynn Martin from Tomasi. I'm also a member of Opus Trust, Oconee Preservation Unlimited Stewardship Trust. And as you know, we're passionate about preservation and conservation. And I'll just go back to the mission. I asked Eddie, I said, what is the mission of the Oconee County Conservation Bank? And the bottom line is for preservation of land, preservation of farms and historical places. It's not about helping a farmer today in his struggles. There are programs available for that. But I just want to go back to the mission. If we go back to the beginning, the mission and what the funds were privately donated for, it was for permanent preservation of land for our future. If you've got to have people like us, we're not going to have food in the future if there are not people like us. So there's a balance. Granted, there have to be developers in this world, but there are those of us who are passionate about land not being developed. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lucretia Morgan, and I'm here tonight to express my concerns regarding the Planning Commission's lack of transparency and the confusing manner in which they conduct business. Confusing not only to the public, but seemingly to their own members as well. At last night's meeting, one of the Planning Commissioners remarked that only one member of the public was present and said, "We gotta do better." But let's consider why the public often doesn't attend these meetings. Take, for example, a recent agenda item that read, discussion regarding Oconee County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 32, Unified Performance Standards. At first glance, that sounds fairly straightforward, but Chapter 32 actually covers an enormous range of topics, including the Planning Commission itself, communication towers, airports, tattoo facilities, RV parks, subdivisions, etc. But it's funny how the topic turned out to be subdivision regulations. If that had been actually disclosed ahead of time, maybe Mr. Dix's wish would have come true, and more people would have actually shown up. So how's the public supposed to know what specifically is being discussed or what input might be relevant? Without clarity or supporting materials, how can anyone come prepared? This kind of vague agenda language diminishes transparency and gives the impression that public involvement is being deliberately discouraged to minimize opposition. In this case, no backup documentation was even provided to clarify what part of Chapter 32 was under review. And let's talk about transparency. To quote Mr. Haney, who is now on the Planning Commission, transparency is like being pregnant. You either are or you're not. He even quoted Britannica defining transparency as the capacity of outsiders to obtain a valid and timely information about the activities of government. That was documented in the County Council meeting right here in this very room on June 15th, 2021, at 6 minutes and 5 seconds into the meeting. Well, by its own standards, the Planning Commission must be in its first trimester of secrecy, because that's the public's been left guessing. The agendas are vague, and the valid and timely information is nowhere to be found. If this is transparency, then apparently someone's using foggy ultrasound setting. Here's another example. A presentation was recently given showing the real-world examples of parcels supposedly hindered by the 50-foot right-of-way ordinance on private roads and drives. I personally pulled the deeds and plats for those examples, and not a single one supported the claim. None of those landowners were unable to divide their property because of this ordinance. This was a manufactured problem used to support a policy change. When citizens take the time to do their homework and discover these inaccuracies, it breeds mistrust in the government, and rightly so. Further undermining public trust is an appearance of favoritism. At a recent meeting, a developer who did not arrive in time to sign up was asked if he wanted to speak, and at last night's meeting, he was the only person signed up to speak and was allowed to talk for nearly 8 minutes uninterrupted. In contrast, I have been only allowed 4 minutes when I speak at the same meeting. This uneven enforcement of time limits sends a clear message. Some voices are given more weight than others. On top of that, I submitted a FOIA request over a month ago asking for the studies and data from 2022 onward that support eliminating the 50-foot right-of-way requirement. I've received nothing, no documents, no updates, just we are working on pulling the documents, or the county attorney has to review these documents. So for a topic that's being discussed, why isn't this information readily available? Why the delay? What is taking so long? Or is there something you don't want us to see? When members of the public do show up and speak during the designated public comment period, we are not allowed to respond. When inaccurate or misleading information is presented later in the meeting, there's no opportunity to correct or clarify the facts. This one-way format silences the public and allows misinformation to go unchallenged. I have one last paragraph, and it's a positive comment. Can I continue?
You have to get council approval. Do we have a motion?
Let her go. Let her
All
speak.
right. So now I want to acknowledge that not all planning commission members operate this way. Some are genuinely trying to make things better. I appreciate those who have proposed forming a dedicated committee to review Chapter 32 and restructure it, so ordinances are categorized and placed properly within the county code. That's a step in the right direction towards clarity, organization, and true transparency. We need more of that mindset and less of the smoke and mirrors. Thank you.
Alan Stewart.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Al Stewart. I'm the FERC licensing manager for the Kiwi Toxway and Bad Creek projects. Duke Energy offers the following comments on the proposed changes to the Oconee County Conservation Bank ordinance currently under consideration by Oconee County. As background, Duke Energy is familiar with the OCCB and its current workings, as we have worked closely with Oconee County and the OCCB staff since 2011, and we have contributed significant funding to the OCCB. In 2012, Duke Energy formally initiated the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission relicensing process for the Kiwi Toxaway Hydroelectric Project, which includes Lake Jocassee and Lake Kiwi. The relicensing proceeding was a very structured, detail-oriented process involving state and federal resource agencies, local governments, including Oconee County, and non-governmental organizations. The KT relicensing process was a stakeholder-driven, comprehensive process investing significant person hours in conducting environmental studies, reviewing data, and developing appropriate protection, mitigation, and enhancement measures to address unavoidable project impacts. Duke Energy and stakeholders worked diligently to strike a balance between operations and environmental surrounding the KT project. To address unavoidable environmental impacts, stakeholders, including Oconee County, negotiated for Duke Energy to provide land conservation funding. Oconee County and others successfully obtained Duke Energy's commitment to provide $600,000 for land conservation, with the funding to be provided to OCCB for those specific purposes. Duke Energy, through extensive mutual gains negotiations with stakeholders, eventually entered into a legally binding KT relicensing agreement with 16 organizations, including Oconee County in 2013, which accompanied Duke Energy's final application for new license filed with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The KTRA outlined mitigation measures for a plethora of environmental concerns, including habitat protection, water quality, cultural resources, and public recreation, and served as the basis for FERC to decide whether to issue a new license for the KT project. Contained in Duke Energy's final license application was Exhibit E, the environmental report, which summarized the study results, provided impact analysis, and documented the rationale for implementing mitigation measures included in the KTRA. In Exhibit E, Duke Energy stated the $600,000 contribution to the OCCB would be used for land conservation, as the KTRA parties intended. In response to Duke Energy's final license application filing and statement, FERC, in conducting its independent review under the National Environmental Policy Act, issued a final environmental assessment on March 28, 2016, in which it adopted Duke Energy's funding contribution to the OCC as an acceptable form of mitigation. Duke Energy continues to foster a longstanding and successful partnership with Oconee County and the OCCB. Further, to date, we believe the OCCB has been a very responsible fiduciary manager of the funding Duke Energy provides in support of mission of land protection and conservation. To be clear, Duke Energy does not oppose Oconee County modifying the current OCCB ordinance. However, should the current OCCB ordinance be modified to permit OCCB funding for purposes other than land conservation, then Duke Energy requests the OCCB establish a separate account for all funding provided by Duke Energy under both the KT and the Bad Creek relicensing agreement, and treat those dollars from Duke Energy as restricted funds to be only used for land conservation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have a letter from Mr. Shay Airy, the former chairman of the Oconee County Conservation Bank Board. As we are out of public comment period, I do want to make a notation. This letter will be provided in the backup to tonight's council meeting on the website.
Ms. Buck, I'd also like, you don't need to read Mr. Wilson's, but I like Mr. Wilson's letter to Duke Energy to be part of the minutes and public record also, please.
I believe that would take a motion, Mr. Reed, am I correct?
I think we've customarily
He requested
gone
it.
to the backup material.
Oh, actually, we do have it via email. I apologize.
He requested.
Yes, that's correct.
And it was not Mr. Wilson, but Mr. Stewart.
I have it via email.
Okay, no other speakers?
No, sir.
Would you go to Mr. Aries?
It will be in the backup material.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott.
Now we're to the council member comment. Any council member comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In light of Mr. Wilson's speech, in light of the Duke Energy letter, I'd like to make a motion. Table second reading of ordinance 2025-12, amending the Conservation Bank ordinance based on what we've heard here, and based on what Duke Energy is represented in the letter and tonight.
Mr. Elliott, if I may ask for you to withhold your motion until we get to the reading of the ordinance.
Sure.
Any other council member comments? All right, hearing none.
I'd like one more comment. I just want to thank everybody for coming out. Everybody has opposing views, but until you come out, we don't know that. I wish every council meeting was like this. I'd like to see them back out in the hallways like they were several months ago. Without your public input, we just got five, white guys up here making decisions for 80,000 people. 80,000 people, and if we don't hear input, it's 5 for 80,000. So thank you for coming.
As all council members know, and it's been reported in the media, this is Mr. James Coley, the Plan Director's last council meeting with us. And I would just like to thank Mr. Coley for the work he's done for Oconee County. And on behalf of the citizens, I know you'll be missed all the way around. Please come back and visit us sometime. All right, now we're to public hearings. Bear with me, some of this is rather long. So for ordinance 2025-01, an ordinance to establish the budget for Oconee County and provide for the levy of taxes for ordinary county purposes, for the Tri-County Technical College Special Revenue Fund, for the Emergency Services Protection Special Revenue Fund, for the Road Maintenance Special Revenue Fund, for the Victim Services Special Revenue Funds, for the State Accommodations Tax Special Revenue Fund, for the Local Accommodations Tax Special Revenue Fund, for the Community Health and Community Services Special Revenue Fund, for the Economic Development Capital Project Fund, for the Bridge and Culvert Capital Project Fund, for the Capital Vehicle/Equipment Fund, for the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Capital Projects Fund, for the Fire Emergency Services Capital Vehicle and Equipment Fund, for the General One-Time Capital Fund, and for the Debt Services Fund, all in Oconee County for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026.
We have no speakers.
No speakers. So I close public hearing on ordinance 2025-01. Now I have ordinance 2025-02. That's an ordinance establishing the budget for the school district of Oconee County and to provide for the levy of taxes for the operations of the school district of Oconee County for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026.
We have no speakers.
Speakers, I close public hearing on ordinance 2025-02. Now I have public hearing for ordinance 2025-03, an ordinance to provide for the levy of taxes for the Kiwi Fire Special Tax District and to establish the budget for the Kiwi Fire Special Tax District for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026.
We have no speakers.
No speakers. I close public hearing for ordinance 2025-03. Public hearing for ordinance 2025-04, an ordinance to provide for the levy of taxes for a Cornish-Shiloh Special Purpose Tax District for fire protection and to establish the budget for the Cornish-Shiloh Special Purpose Tax District for fire protection for fiscal year beginning July 1, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026.
We have no speakers.
No speakers. I close public hearing for ordinance 2025-04. I now have ordinance 2025-11, an ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of a real property lease agreement between the South Union Volunteer Fire Department as leaseor and Oconee County, South Carolina as lessee for a certain improved real property located at 111 Fire Station Road, Westminster, South Carolina, currently identified by tax map number 324-00-04-031 and other matters related thereto.
We have no speakers.
No speakers. I close public hearing on ordinance 2025-11. Now we're to the third reading of the following ordinances, in which we have 5. First is ordinance 2025-01. Can you get it on the screen? I'm not going to read it again, just read it for the public hearing. That is the ordinance for the Oconee County budget. We have a motion to approve.
Make a motion. Second.
Motion, Mr. Hart, second. Mr. Elliott, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
That is 5-0.
Next, we have ordinance 2025-02. That was the ordinance for the school district budget.
So moved. Second.
Motion, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
That is 5-0.
Next is ordinance 2025-03. That's the ordinance for the Kiwi Fire Special Tax District.
So moved. Second.
Motion, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
That is 5-0.
Next is ordinance 2025-04. That's the budget for the Cornish Charlotte Special Purpose Tax District.
So moved. Second.
Motion second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
That is 5-0.
Next is ordinance 2025-11. That's the ordinance for the South Union Volunteer Fire Department.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
That is 5-0.
Now we're gonna move to second reading of other ordinances. I'm gonna recuse myself for ordinance 2025-12. This time I'll turn that over, the meeting over to Mr. Bonds, if y'all send for me when it's over.
All right. Second reading for the following ordinance is ordinance 2025-12, an ordinance amending the Oconee County Conservation Bank Ordinance, Oconee County Code Sections 2-398 through 2-409. I hear a motion.
Make a motion.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, sir. So I make my motion to table.
We got a motion to table. Any seconds? No seconds.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion also, and I'd like to move that we direct staff to begin the process to return any of Duke's remaining funds to them, because from what I read in November 1st, 2016, on the original memorandum of agreement, it says that the money was given to the Oconee Conservation Bank to support conservation activities funded by the Oconee Conservation Bank. And then under bullet point 1 down below that says the following terms and conditions are attached to Duke Energy's provision of funding. It says Duke Energy agrees to provide a grant of $618,000 to grantee to support conservation initiatives approved by the OCB board. So I heard a lot tonight about it was only for easements, but I wasn't around at that time, but everything that I see in writing, it does not just say easements, it says conservation initiatives. So there seems to be some concern about the money being used for other things from the original stakeholders. So I would move that we have staff begin the process to return the remaining money and then go forward with if they want to participate after the changes, then they can do that with full disclosure of what the changes are.
I'll second that. Mr. Mize, we're looking at $300-something thousand returning. We're also looking at $1 million possible from Duke Energy that will put this in jeopardy. I'm not directing it at you, please, with due respect. I think it's stupid. That's $1.3 million of not taxpayer money. That's free money for Oconee County. That's crazy. Excuse me, due respect.
Well,
Somebody gives me $1.5 million.
Nothing's free, everything
I
comes at a
won't
cost.
live here anymore. I'll go to the beach or somewhere, okay? This is crazy.
Yeah, I will say that nothing's free, everything comes with a cost and with strings attached, so. And the agreement originally was much broader, and it seems like it's getting narrower the more we talk about it. So, there was nothing wrong with the things that are being added in these easements or in these conservation efforts. They're all good things, but we want to define it very narrowly now, so.
I want my money back too. Yeah, I think we got 12 donors. I think it's something like 12 donors, a couple $1,000. I think we can find the records to get that money back too. But I'm not running for re-election, but I wish you guys luck next re-election.
Yeah. Amen.
I would like to know what your supporters are. I would like to know why there are no people sitting out here supporting your.
Because we're not gonna get in a back and forth with the audience, but I spoke with my supporters today, and a lot of them are still working right now, so.
You're supposed to answer to us.
Y'all had public comment. So I got the motion on the,
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as I understand the motion, and Mr. James, correct me if I'm wrong, we will come back with, research the viability and the means by which that could happen. We'll come back with that information for third reading. So I don't think, as I understood the motion, that wouldn't impact your deliberation on the Keys application that's going to be considered later this evening, and it wouldn't denute or take away second reading tonight, correct? We're good. The motion was for us to investigate the propriety and the means to do it and bring back that information.
yeah, the motion was to, begin the process of figuring out the best way to get that returned, yeah.
So we'll get that back for third reading, but I don't think it alters the motion that's in front of you.
Okay, so we got the motion to return the money. Now we need to vote on the original motion, or original ordinance. And I'm gonna read it one more time. It's the ordinance 2025-12, ordinance amending Oconee County Conservation Bank Ordinance, Oconee County Code Section 2-398 through 2-409. I hear a motion.
So moved.
Make a motion.
Hear a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Opposed?
Thank you for opposing.
All right, moving on. Bring Matt back.
Okay, we remove no actions from the consent agenda, so now we're gonna move to discussion items. Council consideration and request for approval on a recommendation from OCCB to support and fund a grant request of $116,000 for conservation easement on the Keys Family Farm. Coney County Conservation Bank recommends council approve for off support and funding of a grant request of $116,000 for conservation easement on the Keys Family Farm.
Make a motion to approve.
Second. Have a motion, second.
Yeah.
Any discussion? No discussions, all in favor? Next, I have board and commission appointments. Building Codes Appeal Board, 2 at-large seats, no questionnaires on file. Right now, I have executive session. Need a motion to enter executive session for 4 items. 1, discussion regarding economic development matter, Project Beamer. 2, discussion regarding economic development matter, Project Snow. 3, discussion regarding economic development matter, Project Stallion. And 4, discuss a personnel matter regarding the planning department.
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.